Hello everyone and welcome back to Always Watching. Today we're discussing the new documentary, Lynn Bradley is Missing. Briefly, the docu-series unpacks the mysterious and haunting disappearance of Lynn Bradley. This is one of the first cases I came across when exploring my true crime obsession. There have been so many Reddit threads and underground internet investigations regarding this case, and I doubt younger generations are familiar with who Lynn Bradley is, and I do think that this documentary offers some insight into Amy's disappearance as well as the investigation to possibly spark a new lead. The documentary interviews Amy's family, her friends, eyewitnesses, passengers who were on board at the time of the disappearance, as well as investigators who had worked on the case over a number of years. This was an incredibly thorough and comprehensive series that very much wants you to conclude that Amy is alive, and in doing so, attempts to spark a manhunt through its audience. The first episode unpacks the details of the case, and the remaining two unpack the investigation as well as possible theories about what could have happened to Amy. I've always been naturally put off by the idea of going on a cruise ship. I've read and heard so many stories regarding what happens on these cruise ships and the possible horror stories. While I know that this is not common, I did get the sense that those interviewed from the cruise line were giving pre-recorded and scripted answers. The documentary features very few interviews with crew members who were on board at the time of Amy's disappearance. And from what I could tell, not many have come forward with significant sightings or information regarding what could have happened to Amy that night. Amy's life changed when her family decided to book a cruise, marking a transitional time in their lives. Amy was a recent college graduate who was on the threshold of her new adult life. Amy's life changed when she attended this disco party on board. I imagine when you book a vacation like this, safety isn't always a top priority. You assume the staff and all the passengers are on board have good intentions. And in general, being on vacation can disarm you, and you can actually end up overlooking red flags you normally would never overlook if you were home. Amy was last seen dancing with the bass player of the ship's band, a man she mentions afterwards to her brother before he goes to bed. This interaction between Amy and the bass player was later confirmed from footage of the party. The last time Amy was seen alive was on her balcony, and her father recalls waking up suddenly one night. He doesn't really know what woke him up, but when he did, he found his daughter was gone. What's disturbing about Amy's disappearance is the lack of urgency from the crew and the staff at the time. When Amy's parents begged the captain to conduct a search before the ship was docked, they totally refused. I'm not really sure how common it is for people to go missing on these ships and then later they're found, because if that's the case, I understand why the cruise line made the decision they made. However, I don't think it's that common. Amy's parents were described as frantic at the time, and so they were clearly worried. And so this should have triggered the captain, or at least the people on board, that maybe there is something wrong. And I actually felt my heart sink, because as soon as that ship docked, the odds of finding Amy was slim to none. When someone goes missing, you have a very short period of time to actually find them. Before you're pretty much looking for a needle in a haystack at that point. It becomes incredibly difficult. Listening to the people who are working on the ship at that time, it feels like their priority was to protect the reputation of the company, which in this moment was at complete odds with the safety of their passengers. And parents know when something is off, and that sort of fear, I can't imagine wondering if your daughter is okay and then watching people go off and have their fun. And if the ship was searched before it was docked and an announcement had been made alerting passengers, maybe someone could have seen something that would have found Amy. But unfortunately, all these actions were made way too late to actually make a difference. I really felt it in that moment, because this was a catastrophic mistake. At first, I assumed Amy had fallen off board, and maybe that's what woke up her father. However, the documentary thoroughly explores the possibilities of Amy either falling or possibly committing suicide, and neither seem very plausible. The documentary interviewed a number of police officers, and they all mentioned that if Amy had fallen, something would have washed up on shore, if not her whole body, at least a part of her body. And so this was very unusual. Second possibility is Amy might have taken her own life, and this also seems very unlikely. Amy had come out to her family about her sexuality, and they did not take it very well. While it is possible that she could have fallen into a deep depression, the documentary interviews several of her friends who shared their impression of Amy at the time, and their accounts led me to believe that the likelihood of her just jumping, it just doesn't seem very possible. One of the most frustrating aspects of this case is that it relies entirely on eyewitness testimony to piece together Amy's disappearance and possible whereabouts. The only thing they can confirm for certain is when Amy went back into her room, but they really have no way of knowing when passengers leave their room or how long they're gone for. Due to the limited camera coverage, it's also difficult to determine if someone used another passenger's key card to enter a room without permission. And the documentary really tries its best to retrace Amy's footsteps that night by interviewing crew members or other passengers that remember seeing her or interacted with her in some way. And the most notable witness was this group of young girls who remember seeing Amy dancing with the bass player and later heading up an elevator with him. This man's name is Alistair Douglas. And each witness describes why Amy stood out to them, and so you do believe that they are credible sightings. One of the most unsettling interviews was their neighbor, a man who often travels on cruise ships alone. He admitted that he attended the disco party to scout women, and apparently he would try to have these conversations with Amy either on the balcony, which deeply unsettled her mother. And he came off as a very interesting character because it made me wonder how many of these customers are repeat passengers and whether anything strange happened while these individuals were on board. Because listening to that guy talk, I just wanted to retrace his footsteps. I also found the videographer really suspicious. He was very hesitant to cooperate with the authorities and just give up the master tapes. Again, time is of the essence and someone is missing. There could have been something on those tapes that maybe the FBI could have detected that videographer could not. Unfortunately, there are more theories and rumors about this case than the evidence supports. And since her room was cleaned by the staff, there's really nothing for investigators to hold on to. And once the FBI got involved, their time was extremely limited because they pretty much have until the ship is docked and the passengers go home to figure out what happened to Amy. And trying to gather eyewitness accounts and evidence is really hard when people are on vacation on a busy ship. And the challenge with this case is that there are honestly so many different possibilities, making it nearly impossible to eliminate what didn't happen. The FBI also arrived with very limited resources, leaving them as well as this family completely reliant on the crew. And who's to say the crew didn't find something and were instructed to cover it up or dispose of any evidence? Like, we really don't know. And Amy's parents note that they didn't actually see the crew conduct the search. They just took their word for it. The documentary explores every theory, regardless of how far-fetched. The one that really stood out to me and rubbed me the wrong way was someone overhearing that Amy thought of herself as a very good swimmer. In fact, she was so confident in her swimming abilities that she would jump into the ocean to try and beat the ship ashore. And this claim came from someone who worked on the cruise line, a man with a very long and proud career in the cruise line industry. And he really rubbed me the wrong way because he clearly had a vested interest in this company, therefore had little reason to consider the possibility of foul play. We are told that most of the crew members were hired from different countries, but the vetting process is very unclear. And a company this size likely prioritizes hiring people they can pay the least. And depending on their financial situation, it is entirely possible that crew members were taking up side hustles, such as selling drugs or facilitating contraband to customers. Selling drugs to a few passengers who want to party is one thing, but kidnapping them off a ship is a whole other. One of the theories presented is that Amy went off board to buy drugs, which seems very unlikely because from what her brother and her family were stating, Amy did not really exhibit any unusual behavior to suggest that she was using drugs. And unfortunately, once that ship was docked, no one would have noticed Amy being guided off the ship by force or even carried out in some other way. Once the family arrived home, they were pretty much at the mercy of the media to try and find Amy. And I thought the second episode was really haunting. The documentary presents a number of eyewitnesses who seem very credible to me, and their accounts make you believe that Amy is very much alive and waiting to be saved. There is a terrifying moment when her brother recalls hearing his name while he was out searching for her on the island. And it's very clear that this family has been traumatized, and now they're analyzing every single detail. And when you're so emotionally invested in a case like this, it's really hard to tell what you might be overlooking and what you might be unintentionally fixating on. Her mother recalls the waitstaff showing unusual interest in Amy, and one man in particular who just could not stop staring at them. The eeriest moment is when their family photos disappeared. Someone had purchased them and they have no idea who. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel like whoever purchased those photos is the person who took Amy. And you do get a sense that the people who worked on the ship know a lot more than they're willing to say, maybe even allowed to say. Human trafficking cases are notoriously difficult to solve. You're like trying to find a needle in a haystack. It's pretty much impossible. With various mafia groups operating on the island, as well as the general unwillingness of the population to speak out, the police face serious limitations in trying to find Amy. At the moment, the number one suspect is this bass player, Alistair Douglas. One of the most jaw-dropping moments is when Alistair's daughter ends up calling him on camera. And this documentary really goes above and beyond. And his daughter's willingness to speak on camera about her father really does paint him in an even darker light. Amy has been seen on various different islands, and it is possible that Alistair sold her off to other traffickers since there was just too much heat on him. His daughter recalls her father having a trunk full of photos of white women. And if that's true, it does raise the disturbing possibility that Alistair has been scouting and trafficking women for years. And it would be interesting to know how many young women have gone missing while on vacation, either on a cruise ship or on one of these resorts or tours. Fortunately, the FBI can't exactly look into Alistair's work history, making it really difficult to uncover the truth. The media coverage about Amy has been few and far in between. Her case, as far as I know, I haven't seen anything about it in the mainstream. I've only read about it on Reddit. Each eyewitness who encountered Amy either remembers something very distinctive about her or remember her identifying herself as Amy. And this is promising because if she's still out there, she very much remembers who she is. And these sightings have given her family hope. And I felt for her parents. I mean, you could tell that they were incredibly optimistic that something would eventually turn up. And there was a moment in the documentary where her brother explains why he doesn't really want to have children, and that's because he doesn't want to put himself in this same situation. And this is really every parent's nightmare. I mean, if a body turns up, at least you have closure. But the idea that your daughter could be tortured or something could be happening to her and you don't know what and there's nothing you can do, this is the stuff of nightmares. A major turning point in the case is when these disturbing photos of Amy appeared on this nefarious website. I remember seeing these photos when I was younger, and something about her eyes in these photos were really triggering and haunting and terrifying to me. The FBI explained why they believed these photos could be Amy. These photos were confirmed as genuine and unaltered, and it further decreases the likelihood that she is dead. And each sighting of Amy gets darker, and that's why the photo feels very real. One of the last credible sightings of Amy was in a bathroom, where an eyewitness overheard the men she was talking to about seeing children. This seemed to make the woman who appeared to be Amy very happy. And the encounter is even more unsettling because when asked her name, the woman again repeats Amy. Now, if Amy has children, the odds of her reaching out is slim to none. Traffickers tend to use very coercive measures to keep people in check. And since Amy is a high-profile case, especially after this documentary, they will not make her easy to find. And wherever she is, it won't be easy to get to. Over the years, the case has garnered new attention on social media. One true crime fanatic notes how he started a website in hopes of finding new information about Amy. And with the help of an eyewitness, they started tracking data from the website to figure out where people were visiting this website from. Now, granted, these people could be using VPN. I'm not really sure how they'd be able to tell, but they did identify a pattern in one location. Someone would frequently visit the website on birthdays, holidays, holidays, and other milestones. This is really terrifying because it means the people holding her captive are actively following the case, or Amy herself is desperately looking for information about her family. And this is the kind of case that could have easily faded into obscurity. Amy hasn't really been in the public eye in a long time, and if she has, it's quite sporadically. I mean, there's a lot of missing persons cases, and this is not one of the cases that I have seen a mainstream documentary on, especially one like Netflix. This is a big deal. You do feel like this documentary is a big deal, and there's a lot of hope that people will see it and someone will figure something out. I do think this documentary will spark a new wave of armchair detectives, because this case has everything you need to become obsessed, and you honestly never know where that could lead. And so overall, I highly recommend this documentary. Like, this was incredibly comprehensive. It was making a very clear statement. Like, this wasn't a neutral documentary. It does want to leave you with the impression that Amy is alive and they're actively searching for leads, and they're